Welcome to the Martial Artist Session, one of the first that I thought of for Y Days 2020. Due to the lockdown, we are now in the privileged position of being able to have Keith Harris, a martial arts expert and illustrious music manager, chair the session. And we have a great range of musicians and martial artists. We also have a world champion boxer, but she also started out doing Taekwondo, while our wrestler Joe Hendry, he was originally a judo player. So we've got a lot of martial arts covered. There's many different facets to this conversation. And after the panel is over, join us in the networking room and come and meet some of the speakers. Thanks for joining us, and over to you, Keith.
Hello there. Hi, Olaf, and hi, everybody else. In this company, I'm very reluctant to describe myself as a martial arts expert. However, I am a martial arts old guy. I've certainly been doing martial arts longer than everybody else in the room at the moment. I'm sure I never quite achieved their levels. Can I please ask you each, starting with you, Nabihah, if you don't mind, to give a very brief introduction of yourselves, both as martial artist and musician?
Sure. My name's Nabiha Iqbal, and I'm a DJ, producer, musician, broadcaster from London. And I'm also a second dan black belt in Shotokan karate, which I started when I was 5 years old.
Joe.
My name's Joe Hendry. I'm a professional wrestler. Before I got into wrestling, I became a first dan black belt in judo. I was in a band called Lost in Audio for a long time. Then I got into professional wrestling, and at the age of 27, I started amateur wrestling, became two-time British champion in Greco and freestyle, and represented Scotland at the Commonwealth Games.
Great. Hannah.
Hi, my name is Hannah Rankin. I'm a professional bassoonist. I play bassoon in the contrabassoon, so that's what I do most of the time when I'm not doing boxing. I'm a professional boxer as well. Last year, I became Scotland's first ever female world champion as a professional boxer. So, enjoy mixing the both of them.
And Renell.
Hi, my name is Renell Shaw. I'm a songwriter, composer, and music producer. I studied Wing Chun with my uncle. I started when I was 9. And then as I got older, mid-20s, I started to do Tai Chi. Competed a little bit when I was younger, but now I just do it to keep me balanced, really.
Okay, so at least we all have that much in common. Let me ask each of you a question. What was it that first attracted you to the martial arts? Can I start with you, Hannah? What as a bassoon player, it would seem like a quite dodgy thing to do, to start to be a professional boxer.
Yeah, no, well, actually, when I was a kid, I started off in Taekwondo. Me and my sister both went. I think my mum was trying to get us to stop fighting each other, so she sent us to Taekwondo, and I actually just fell in love with like the discipline of it and all of the techniques. And the thing I love about all martial arts actually is the fact that you can never really learn everything, and there's always something new to learn. And whenever you get in front of a different opponent, you're constantly getting pushed, and you've got to figure out their style and see how you can make your style work to beat them. So yeah, like obviously fell in love with that when I was younger, but when I got into music, I stopped doing martial arts because I thought, well, probably a good idea not to like damage myself. But then when I finished my undergraduate in Glasgow at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, I wanted to get fit again, and the normal, like going to normal gym is not exactly my favorite thing. So I got back into doing Thai boxing up in Glasgow at the Grip House. I was doing Thai boxing and circuits, and then moved to London to start my masters, and got introduced to boxing down there with my coach Noel Callan, and I just fell in love with it, and it kind of flew on from there. So yeah, kept myself busy.
Excellent. Renell, what was the kind of attracted you to martial arts? I know you said you were messing around with your uncle and stuff, but to take it more seriously, what prompted you to do that?
Well, my uncle is a martial arts teacher, so I think watching him just kind of spar and train was just, I didn't see adults do that. So that was the first thing. And if I'm quite honest with you, just kung fu movies, hip hop. Wu-Tang had a lot of references of martial art films in their videos, and just the amazing, almost like superhuman ability of Bruce Lee. And my uncle told me that Bruce Lee studied as a foundation, his style was Wing Chun.
Yeah.
And it just made me want to be a part of it. And I guess, again, as a young man with a lot of energy, my mum said, you know what, go with your uncle, go hit something, or hit back.
I think all of us, certainly London-based martial artists, had that Friday night kung fu movie, Holloway Road, in common. It's funny seeing people coming out, everybody wanted to practice their moves on the street. Nabihah, so how did you get started in it?
Well, I started when I was so young. I was only 5 years old when my parents decided to put me in karate classes. So I guess at that time it wasn't really my choice, but I loved it, and so carried on ever since then. And I've got 5 younger brothers and sisters, and my parents put all of us in karate, and now there's only 2 of us who still do it. So everyone else dropped off along the way. And I mean, I've had stops and starts just because of uni and moving around and living in different places, but right now I'm pretty serious back into training, and it feels amazing. I wish I'd never had a break. And also, it's quite inspiring to be in the company of some world-class martial artists in this discussion. That's probably could learn a few things from them and just carry on. But yeah, I mean, it was my parents who started me in it, and then you just carry on if you actually like it. I think when you get to a teenager, that's like the make or break point. Do you carry on or do you get into other stuff? And for me, I decided to carry on.
Yeah. Joe, in the green room, we were talking about you going backwards and forwards from Cope Bridge to America, fighting. It's amazing that you would do that as well alongside a career as a musician. Have you found that the martial arts has started to take over, or are you still more musically inclined?
Well, actually, my situation is a little strange because I'm a professional wrestler. So professional wrestling is kind of a mix between entertainment and sport. So look, what we're doing is, it's entertainment, it's predetermined, but it's very, very physically demanding. And I was very fortunate, though. The reason I've been able to stand out as a professional wrestler is because I make songs about my opponents, making fun of my opponents. So I have custom entrances coming to the ring. So for example, when Miley Cyrus did the Wrecking Ball, I rolled to the ring in a Zorb, and I called it the Hendry Ball, and I did a whole song on that. And my songs kind of went viral, and that's how I was able to get a contract. So really, I don't know if I would struggle to call myself a successful musician, but I guess it's a huge part of my job. So I guess I'm split right down the middle. I'm a pro wrestler and a musician. So I think it's really split down the middle. I just wouldn't be where I am without the music, and I wouldn't be where I am without the wrestling, which I took to quickly because I'd done judo in the past. So I can't separate the two. And I love them both, and I guess I'm really fortunate that I get to do both. I remember, I was saying to my mum one time, I was like, oh, it's a shame that music was the one dream I didn't really get to live out and see its full potential. And she's like, what are you talking about? That is your job. Write songs about your opponents. And I guess she's right. So it's perfectly split down the middle, I'd say.
Right. I'm going to come to all of you and ask you a particular question, which is to do with actually the mental health aspect of martial arts, because there's been a lot of talk in the last 2 years about musicians' mental health, and I think personally that martial arts has helped to balance me over the years. Do you think that's been a factor? I mean, Hannah, can I start with you?
Yeah, it's definitely been a factor for me. I think when I was studying music and things at the Royal Academy of Music and at the Conservatoire in Scotland, I definitely struggled with sort of performance anxiety for solo performing. I love playing in orchestras and as a quintet and things like that, but I really struggled with being up there on stage doing all the solo repertoire. And actually, when I started boxing, it sort of put things into perspective a little bit for me. Obviously, no one's going to try and punch me in the face when I'm on stage playing the bassoon. And it just made me enjoy it so much more. And so like I could really like become more confident, and that helped my confidence and put me in a much better place for doing solo performing. So actually boxing, even though it came later, helped me with my music. So it helped me be a lot calmer as well, which I really enjoy.
Yeah. Nabihah, you talked about being one of several siblings who are in martial arts. Did you find that because you've kind of grown up with it, it was just a part of you, or did you feel that you were able to help it translate into helping with your music career?
I think building on what Hannah said, there's so much about martial arts, whatever you do. Obviously, for me, it's karate, but I feel like in all of the different types of disciplines throughout the martial arts world, there's a lot that you can take from and then translate it into other aspects of your life. And the confidence thing is definitely one of those. And then also just discipline as well. And also having like a kind of like level outlook on what you're doing and how you work with other people. Because one thing I really appreciate about the dojo and karate is the level of respect that you have to afford to one another, no matter where you are, what belt you are, how old you are, everything like that. And so I feel like, yeah, all of those things are so positive, and you can just take them out of the dojo and then put them into your music career or just your life generally. And there's so much to benefit from.
Yeah. And Renell, did you find that it's been mentally calming for you as a musician?
Big time. I think for me, martial arts really helped me find that internal balance, especially with working in like music industry, music business stuff. It just gave me something to kind of start my day right and put me in a state of mind that kept me focused, irrespective of what disturbances may come along the day.
I think one of the things, just speaking personally about being in the music business and martial arts is when I first started, I started quite old. So I was about 24, 25, and finding myself on the one hand working with Stevie Wonder, on the other hand being kicked around by a lot of 16-year-olds who are much better than me. Yeah, kind of it really brings you down, down to a level, and give you a real perspective on life. Has anybody had those kind of experiences where, on the one hand, you're a solo performer and everybody thinks it's great, and on the other hand, you think to yourself, God, I got absolutely hammered last night by some young kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just if you're an artist and you're working in the creative world, and we get really used to people just telling us that, oh, you're amazing all the time, and like you've got an ego because you're creative and you're just trying to focus on your work, and it's hard. People aren't so critical with you all the time as perhaps they were during school or university. And so I think like when you go into the dojo for training, then all of that goes out of the window. And my sensei just rips me apart sometimes, or like you just have really intense kumite sessions and you just come out feeling bruised and battered and also like not happy with yourself that you weren't better. But you need all of that because you need someone to bring you back down. And what's the point of living if we are not always trying to strive to be better, right? To always improve. So just, yeah, it's like a bit of a reality check, and I think it's important. I don't know how the others feel, but I really feel that.
I totally agree. Like, yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say I totally agree. I think martial arts is extremely humbling, and like this kind of ties into the mental health thing for me. Like I feel like martial arts is just absolute truth. Like in creative industries, there's a lot of politics, and there can be in amateur sports, but everything's so subjective in creative art, so it can be really frustrating if you're trying to get to that next level. Whereas if you win in a martial art, it's you've won. That's it. There's no kind of it's not about kind of politics or this or that. It's you win, you lose, and it's on you. So I found that really therapeutic when I was like struggling with professional wrestling, for example. But in terms of like keeping your ego in check, it's like in martial arts, there's always someone. It's like one of my heroes is George St. Pierre, mixed martial arts. And he says, look, no matter who you are or how good you are, there is someone who always has your number. Even the best fighter in the world, it's rock, paper, scissors. There's someone out there who their strengths can use that against your weaknesses and can defeat you. So it always keeps you on your toes, and it's extremely humbling. And I've always found that the best martial artists and the people who are kicking my ass up and down the mat are usually the most humble. I don't know if anyone else has found that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's the ones who are just, it's because they're, in my opinion, their battle is normally with themselves. How can I be stronger, faster, quicker, more efficient? So you're just kind of, you're a bit of a punch bag, but not in a aggressive way. I always find it's in a way of exchanging knowledge between hands. As we say, we spar with forgiving hands. But even when I'm sparring with someone, they're focusing on making their technique better while I'm just trying to keep up sometimes. So, yeah.
Can I touch on another subject, which I'm sure all of you have experienced, and I know I have, and that is fear. Now, I think as a musician, especially if you're a solo performer, you always have an element of fear. As a martial artist, you definitely do. What do you do to conquer that? And are the techniques that you use similar for as a musician and as a martial artist? Hannah, can I start with you?
Yeah, no. So there are actually some real similarities for me. I found that obviously I think with boxing for me, I go into a training camp. So I'm in a training camp like 8 to 10 weeks, say for a world title fight or whatever. And by the time I come out of those 10 weeks, I couldn't have worked any harder and I couldn't have pushed myself any further. So I feel like mentally and physically very strong. And I use those sort of like positive reinforcements of how well I've trained to be like feel strong and successful and positive about my next performance. And I try to use those sort of techniques like when I'm practicing for an upcoming concert or something like that, and I'm feeling nervous about going on stage on my own. Like I drill it, I've gone through it a million times, I do all of those different things. But for both of them, I use breathing as a massive important part of my training and playing the bassoon. So I do lots of breathing techniques to help calm my nerves, clear my head. So they both go really well together. But yeah, there's so many crossovers that definitely work.
Yeah. Nabihah, what do you think?
I'm still trying to figure out how to conquer not getting really nervous before I do a live performance. I'm all right when I DJ. I guess there's kind of like less on the line, but when I'm going on stage to perform my own music, sometimes I still really freak out. But yeah, there's definitely elements of karate which help with that. And obviously also like when you're about to spar with someone who looks a bit scarier than you, it's also the same. But yeah, I think what Hannah said, breathing is a really important technique. It's the same for musicians or singers as well as it is with martial artists. And then also just trying to clear your mind and stay focused, because sometimes at those like moments of intense pressure, you just start letting your thoughts run away with you. So it's really important to just try and block everything else out and just focus on like the task at hand and what you're trying to do. And that applies to both karate and music.
I think like, I was going to say the thing that I find difficult with the two of them actually with music, I'm so emotionally attached to it. It's something I've been doing since a really young age, and like my teacher always used to say you wear your heart on your sleeve, and I'm better at controlling that sort of emotional sort of outburst with my boxing, because I need to be technically quite focused, and I can't let my emotions get the better of me, else I'll do something stupid or rush or do something like that. Whereas when I'm doing music, I want people to see the emotions and the things that are attached, but I also don't want it to let it overwhelm me and get so nervous and worried that they're not going to enjoy it. So it's actually quite difficult on both sides when it comes to emotions. It's just that little bit different. I find it quite hard. So yeah,
I completely agree with you there. Like for me personally, like I actually think that's why I wasn't really that successful in music by itself, is because I was so emotional about everything. I made all my decisions with emotion, whereas with like martial arts and pro wrestling, I made all my decisions with logic. When it comes to fear, like I'll just be honest, I'm absolutely terrified before everything that I do, before pro wrestling, amateur wrestling, or music, whatever. I'm absolutely terrified. I get horrible stage fright, but I think that's part of the process. It's overcoming that, and I think overcoming that is personal growth. And the way I learned to deal with it is just acceptance. Just I'm going to be absolutely terrified before all my matches, and I can either it's a kind of physical response, but I think you can recognize it as fear or excitement. And I think the moment that you accept it, that it's going to happen, and then try to make it a positive part of the experience, just know that by overcoming that fear, greatness is on the other side. I think that's a key part of the process, and it wouldn't be so magic if that wasn't there. So I get afraid all the time. I think it's just accepting it.
Now, Renell, you strike me as being a pretty calm guy. Do you do you suffer the same nerves as everybody else?
Yeah, man. Yeah, big time. I meditate a lot, and my idea of meditation isn't about clearing your mind. I think if you did that, then your lungs and heart would stop, and that might be a problem. So what I do is I observe my thoughts, and I just kind of recognize, okay, well, why am I scared? What is it that worries me? And I weigh up the facts. I go, well, you always deliver. So what are you scared about today? Okay, it's this. And there's a Bruce Lee quote that came to me. I promise you I will not quote this guy through the whole thing. But he says, courage is not the absence of fear. It's the ability to act in the presence of fear. And I really resonate with that. So when I meditate, I take that on and I process and I just step forward and do what I know I can do.
Yeah, I think it's a good policy. It's interesting, though, that you talked about not clearing your mind, because I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, martial arts wise, was to clear your mind. So when you actually get out there to face somebody, rather than having all these thoughts going, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that, and you actually clear your mind, and you've done your training. React to what you see in front of you. Yeah, in a way, Hannah, I think that's what you're referring to about routining stuff. You know, you've trained, you know, you have the confidence, you know, you have the ability. Just react to what's going on in front of you.
Yeah, my coach has this. We do like a lot of mental training, but with the pair of us, and we have a thing where I listen to his voice, and we're talking about staying focused and stay present in the moment. Because I'm quite hyperactive and constantly like thinking about a million things at once. And I'm like thinking of all the things that could happen, the things that haven't happened, that are going to happen. And he's like, actually just want you to stay focused and stay present in the current moment, because that's the moment that counts. Whereas in music, the difference with that is that I'm always looking 4 or 5 bars ahead. Whereas in boxing, I need to be right there and then in that moment and not be thinking about what is coming up or what could happen. So I try really hard to differentiate those two things with the music and boxing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Does anybody else find that? I mean, Nabihah, again, as an artist, you know, you do have to think ahead a little bit, you know, on the music side. Whereas in martial arts, if you think ahead, you can find yourself in serious trouble.
Yeah, it's true. But I think it's just more, yeah, obviously, you know, there's different ways you need to approach what you're doing at that moment in time, whether it's in music or in karate, but just having that kind of like, what is it? I guess, you know, attention to detail and just having also quick reflexes as well. So obviously in karate, you've got to think about what you're doing at that time, but also exactly what's coming up in the split second afterwards as well. And so just having that astuteness and being alert really helps with music too, and also with DJing as well, because you've got to think, you know, it's like a communication between yourself and the crowd, and you've got to be really kind of like intuitive with what's going on in the room. And so yeah, just thinking about that moment at the time, but then also where you're going to go next, but in different ways. Yeah.
I'm going to ask an old person's question now, because one of the things I've noticed in martial arts, and I wonder whether it's the same in music, because I've never really been much of a musician, is that as you get older, the way that you react, it changes. You actually tend to anticipate, because Nabihah, you were talking about reactions being important. As you get older, your reactions slow down. So you actually fight a different way. You actually try to step ahead because of experience. Does anybody find that in music? Do you try to stay one step ahead of what's coming up in trends or in performance?
Well, yeah. Joe, are you going to say something?
Carry on.
No, if anyone else wants to talk.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that's an interesting one, because partly yes, partly no, in the sense that I try and stay aware of what's going on as a writer and a composer, producer. But I think what brings people to kind of my workspace is the fact that it's unique. And I guess as long as I'm doing kind of what feels right now, but keeping an eye on what is happening, I feel like I'm catching a bit of both, if that makes any sense. It's like I'm not trying to be what's new. I'm already a part of it because it's happening. Yeah, does that make sense? Or
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Joe, I'm quite interested because as you said that not all your stuff, but a lot of professional wrestling is choreographed. So you really have to be thinking about what's coming up next. Yeah. How does that work?
You're almost right. I honestly, pro wrestling is such a, if people knew what it actually was and what it should be, that picture there, I was lucky enough to be in the ring with Kurt Angle. He's the Olympic gold medalist and WWE champion, all that good stuff. The thing about professional wrestling is when it's done right, it's not actually what I would say choreographed. You are reacting to what's happening. So for example, let's say I'm the bad guy and I'm in charge of what's going on in that moment. The bad guy will usually kind of determine what's going to happen. So for example, if the crowd I'm in front of are reacting to me being more of a character, then I'm going to do things to steer into that character. Whereas if I hear them react extremely loudly for a high impact slam, then I'm going to add more of that in, if you see what I mean. And I'm going to have to do that in a way that the audience cannot tell that conversation is taking place. Sometimes it won't actually be a conversation. So we have like keywords, for example. And, this is usually a few years ago, we wouldn't have had this discussion, but the industry is really blown open right now. Everyone knows what it is, but I can say one word to my opponent and they will know the next 45 seconds of action that is going to happen based on that one word. So we have keywords that mean this sequence of moves or that sequence of moves. And if you're a great professional wrestler or even a good one, that should change depending on what the audience is doing. So that idea, what we're talking about, being in the moment, and the thing I've kind of read a lot about is flow state, being able to be in the moment. That's when things are great. And I think that works across martial arts and creative industries as well.
That's a really interesting point. Go ahead, Renell.
Sorry, that just really blew my mind because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like I'm seeing a lot of similarities between professional wrestling and jazz in regards to, what the chords are, but the improvisation taking place is, like you said, it's a flow state, and the other musicians are almost reacting to what the double bassist is doing or the keys player, and if the keys player is really going for it, the band will follow and stuff like that.
Exactly. It's exactly like that. I mean, there will be times, and there have been times where if my opponent is at the other side of the ring and we get told, okay, you got 2 minutes before the match needs to finish, we basically need to have a conversation with our eyes, of what's going to happen next. And if we get that wrong, someone could get a concussion. So there almost has to be a clear leader and a follower. So in that picture you saw, that's Kurt Angle. He's literally on the Mount Rushmore. So I'm going to shut my mouth and keep those ears open and listen to exactly what he says and he does. So if he's wanting something to happen, I'm going with the flow, and unless he asks for it, I'm not putting much input there because he's the expert. So he would be like the leader of the band, if you will. And the referee plays a key part as well. He might need to communicate between us. It's a very unique art form, I guess, and a sport kind of.
Hannah, in classical, there's not really a lot of scope for improvisation, but when you sense that an audience particularly likes a piece, is there something that you can do to continue it in the same way as Joe's talking about in wrestling?
I think I was going to say, in answer to your question beforehand, actually, I'm doing a lot, like you were saying, your previous experience is now affecting your judgment and your ideas. And I think obviously a lot of my repertoire is like from composers from the past. So yeah. I have experience playing that music, and I know how that music is meant to be portrayed and how it should be heard and listened to and stuff like that. So I'm definitely using my past experience for that. But I think if you're in an orchestra and like the conductor is the person that's going to be influenced by the feeling of the moment. So if everything's like deadly still and you're doing everything silently and it's really impressive, then he's going to take it even lower than you've ever done it in rehearsal, because it's making everybody's arms tingle and it's great. But he's the person that's in charge of that. As the performer within an ensemble, you're not really in charge of that. But if you're doing solo stuff, then you can see the audience are like wanting to hear more. Then you try and you take it to the real low stuff, and like as low as you can or as high as you can, to see if you can get more of a reaction from them.
Yeah, Nabihah, do you find you have to go with the flow in the same kind of way?
Yeah, I mean, with live performances of my own music, obviously, you have the set list and the songs that you're going to perform, but each show is different. And also, however much you rehearse, it's not the same as when you actually get out on the stage at a gig, and then and you're there in front of a crowd of people. And sometimes you have no idea. Well, yeah, you never really have any idea how it's going to go, but sometimes it takes you really by surprise. Like, I've played gigs where I thought, in my mind, I just thought, oh, it's not going to be very busy. And then it was absolutely rammed and I wasn't really mentally prepared for it. And I was just freaking out right before the show in the dressing room. I was like, oh my God, there's so many people. And then there's been other times where I've like played at a festival. Well, this had just happened once, luckily. And then there was a power cut right in the middle of my set, which is any musician's worst nightmare. And, festival crowds are always more difficult to win over anyway, because they're not all there specifically to see you. So it was really nerve-wracking time. And so, there's all these eventualities that you have to try and adapt to, but you don't know what's going to happen. And again, just having like trying to stay calm and trying to sort of like prioritize what's important in those times, all of that is helped with karate training for sure. Like, there's no doubt about it, because there's so much you can take away mentally from, but everyone, I think, from the outside world always looks at martial arts or, wrestling or boxing as a very physical thing, and it's just all about power and speed and muscle, but they don't understand how much mentally comes from it, and how much you have to give mentally as well. And then I think also for all of us, we probably don't even realize how much of our martial arts training filters through into other aspects of our life. But then something might happen, and then you look back on it and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I dealt with that because of doing this many years of karate or boxing and things like that. Personally, for me at the moment, I'm appreciating karate more than I've ever done, because the last few months have been like some of the toughest that I've been through, not only because of the whole global situation that everyone's faced with at the moment with COVID and how that's affecting musicians' work. Like, all my gigs and everything have been cancelled, but then just had to deal with a lot of other things as well, like my music studio getting burgled, and I lost all the music I've been working on for the last 2 years, including my new album, and just have to start that again from scratch. And then and like other stuff, like my granddad being really ill, and my mind just was going crazy. And I never had that before, because I always considered myself to be quite strong-minded. And so in all of that, I just look forward to my karate training so much now, because it's like a few hours where you just forget about that stuff, and then you can kind of like try and sort your brain out a bit. So yeah, I'm finding a whole new side to it at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's
one thing there.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I'm just going to tag on to that. Like, I don't know how anyone else feels, but like, I don't know if it's a kind of creative thing, but I feel a lot of people that I work with, and myself included, tend to be quite anxious. Like, I'm a very anxious person. I overthink absolutely everything, and it's tough to deal with sometimes. Whereas one of the few places where I'm not overthinking everything, like it's been said before, is when I go to my freestyle wrestling training or my Greco wrestling training, because I have to be in the moment. And I think that the whole COVID situation is putting a lot of, probably especially everyone, but creative people as well, in a situation where we're alone with our thoughts all the time, and we're missing that kind of that growth experience that we have from martial arts. And I think that doing martial arts, if you're an overthinker, it's very therapeutic, and I think that it really helps balance out if you're an anxious person. I've found, anyway. I don't know if anyone else feels that.
Anybody else?
Totally agree. It's in my opinion, it's a distribution of energy. changing that kind of anxious energy into something you can use as like a physical output.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
I think one of the common misunderstandings with martial arts, people talk about, oh, it's very spiritual, but actually, the spirit kind of infuses the art, if you see what I mean. It's not like you go away for hours on end and think, right now I'm going to be spiritual. Yeah. I think the threat of imminent serious danger, yeah, is one of the things that makes you spiritual. You think, well,
Yeah.
you know, I'm going to have to concentrate here, and yeah, it just puts you closer to the physical reality of what you're doing. You know, and I think
Puts you closer to
probably,
your instincts as well.
yes,
Because as
exactly,
human beings, it's
exactly.
like, you know, we're
Well,
biologically designed to be like hunter-gatherers, you know, in
yeah,
very dangerous, you know, very situations where you have to make super important decisions that are life or death. And as human beings, we don't really have anything close to that right now, especially in COVID, when we're all kind of, you know, most of us are in the safety of our homes and there's social media, and it can kind of give a skewed version of really, as human beings, what we were kind of biologically supposed to experience. And I
Yeah.
feel that martial arts brings us a little bit closer back to that. Like, you find a lot of people who tend to do physical work tend sometimes to be happier than people who are sitting at a desk sometimes. And I think that it just gives you a chance to be physical and a little closer to that instinctive side of you, that primal side of you. I don't know if anyone else feels that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think also as well that what you were saying there is like that chance to feel like the adrenaline and the side of things. Like, people always say to me that music and boxing, they're completely crazy. Why would you put those two things together? They're nothing alike. And I'm sitting there thinking they're everything alike. You know, during this time right now, I'm really missing performing. I'm missing being on stage and getting that buzz, the excitement, but I'm also missing fighting, you know, from the same thing, the buzz, the excitement. And boxing and music for me is entertainment. And it's a chance for me to go out there and put on a show, and you get that excitement from it, and it's what, you know, drives me, and I enjoy it. But I'm missing it terribly at the moment because I haven't got that bit where I get to perform in front of people. And I think, you know, being a performer, that's what we're all missing for sure.
I think Joe touched on something I'd like to sort of almost kind of, I'm not sure how long we've been going, but kind of wrap up with, which is the concept of winning. Because obviously, you know, as a martial artist, you know you've won. As a musician, you never really get that release, do you, of knowing that you've won? I guess, Hannah, you probably come the closest, because if you complete a classical piece with no mistakes and everything's gone perfectly, then.
But I don't know, not even then, because I think what you're looking for is that sweet spot when you're performing. Yeah. It's the bit where you suddenly realize you're not thinking about performing, you're in the moment. And it's a really difficult thing to kind of to grasp, and you try to find it every time you perform, especially for solo performing, but you try and find that bit where you're perfectly in the moment and you've got control of the melody. You're not thinking about, oh, this fingering is coming up, or it's that difficult bit. You're just in the flow. And that's the bit you kind of strive to find, but it never, like, you can play it all perfectly, but you didn't quite hit the heights of the emotion of it. And yeah, definitely, I think that's something that we all kind of try to find as performers.
Yeah, and if the other performers think that you get that feeling, the same feeling as you get if you win a martial arts tournament, you know, from performing. Anybody else get that feeling, that same release?
Yeah, I think just to touch on what both Joe and Hannah were saying, they both kind of touched on that kind of flow state. I think that is the win for me as a musician. Yeah. Like, when touring and on stage, even if it's the same gig but it's different audiences, what you're trying to do is connect to whatever that frequency of flow state is for that gig. And, you know, how you work with the band. For myself as a bassist, it's how do I lock into the pocket with the drummer? That's really important for me. And sometimes it's just like, it's so thin you can't even let air pass through it because the groove's so tight. And that feels like a win to me. So yeah.
If I could add one thing, like, for me, like, I don't know if anyone else feels this, but obviously it's a huge thrill when you win a tournament, but there's been times like the Commonwealth Games, for example, I lost my match, and, you know, that was kind of disappointing, but I didn't feel disappointment because I knew I genuinely did the absolute best that I could do. So I was at peace with it. Like, I don't know if anyone else feels that. Like, it didn't feel like a loss because I did the best I could do. It was almost like the battle was with myself, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What about you, Nabihah? Are you do you ever get a sense of having won when you finish a gig, or when you finished an album?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I feel about martial arts and music, or more generally maybe sports and music, is that there aren't any shortcuts, and that's why I appreciate like prolific musicians or amazing sports people so much, because you know that okay, you have that moment of winning whatever it is, or completing a record, or playing a good gig, but that's only a very tiny part of it. I think, it's more about the quest and the journey and the discipline and the rigorous way with which you approach your work. And for me, that's the most important thing. So you'll see the end product. Okay, whoever wins the World Karate Championships or in the Olympics, or people who play amazing shows, or produce amazing albums. But then as a musician myself, and also as a martial artist, it's thinking about everything behind that. And that for me is like the most inspiring thing, and also the most fulfilling thing as well, right? Because when you get to that point where you feel happy and you feel satisfied, because you're thinking about the whole entire journey that got you to that spot. And that's definitely how I felt when I finished my first album. And this second album journey, it's just taking a lot longer than I thought, but I feel like it's the universe telling me that I haven't had enough like annoying life experience yet to make a second album. So we'll just have to see. I hope now like my streak of bad luck has finished and I can get down to it. But yeah, that what I'm trying to say is that there's just so much, it goes deep. It's what you were saying earlier about martial arts being spiritual. For me, music is the most spiritual art form. And I feel like we're all just on a journey to get to the essence of it. Why do we do it? What are we trying to say with what we do, our work, and all of those things? And it's never ending when you think about it.
Yeah. One of the great things for me, and one of the great parallels, and this kind of final comment from everybody on it, is both music and martial arts are a great kind of forum for kind of equality and diversity. You get all kinds of people in both disciplines, and you respect everybody for it.
Yeah.
So does anybody find that as a common thread?
Absolutely. Yeah. If I turn up at a boxing gym anywhere in the world, I don't need to speak the language. As long as you can show that you can fight and that you're willing to work hard when you're in the gym, you're taken in. And it's the same thing with music. You don't need to speak a particular language. You just have to be able to like put a bit of yourself into what you're playing and work with others. And it doesn't require anything other than that. And that's kind of a universal thing. I think it's amazing.
I think it's equality of opportunity as well. Like, it's if you're on the mat with someone, like I've been on the mat when I've had, nothing in my pocket, no money to my name whatsoever. And I've beat someone who in their private life is a millionaire, and on the other side of the coin, I've been in gyms where people might have known me from pro wrestling, but they've beaten me and, they're kind of maybe trying to get into wrestling or whatever. So it's like, I've been on both sides of it where it's like, I sometimes feel in society and in the workplace, there can be, sort of like status, whereas like in the gym, it's like it's all earned. There's nothing like that. It's just what you were saying, Hannah. If you go in and you work hard, that's how you kind of define your legacy on the mat, regardless of anything else. And it's it's an awesome thing.
One of the reasons that I included the photograph that I included of myself here is because there's three of us in my class down in southeast London. And it's a very, very working class area. So there's me, a guy called Adrian Lester, who's an actor, and a guy called Dej Mahoney, who used to be head of legal and business affairs for Sony for 12 or 13 years. And the three of us are of a completely different background from pretty much anybody else there. But nobody talks about it. Nobody mentions it. I mean, Adrian Lester is a well-known actor, so people kind of know that he's famous. But the rest of us, we are at one with some of the poorest people in London. And I kind of love that. Right. I think we can go on. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say also from a gender perspective, I find karate really interesting. The fact that, karate was actually started by a woman before Shotokan karate existed, obviously you had like martial arts from the Shaolin monks, but you also had White Crane Kung Fu, which was a precursor to Shotokan, and White Crane was a style that was actually started by a woman. And all of these things have kind of been written out of history. You know, you have to do the research to find it out. But then also when you look at modern day karate competitions and you see like the finesse with which women perform their katas, I always actually, you know, maybe it's personal bias, but I think women are better at doing katas than men, because like it's not all about just like
You'd be surprised to hear that I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to watch it, right? There's so many, like, it's so graceful and nuanced, and so I just feel like, you know, yeah, it's a very level playing field for men and women, because there's different things that both sides can bring to the martial art and enhance it, and that's something which I really love about it.
So thank you all very much, Hannah, Joe, Renell, and Nabihah. That's really, for me, it's been a kind of a very enlightening and thrilling conversation. For those of you who are watching this, you can meet up with our panelists after this in the artist meeting room or the networking room or whatever these creative people from Y Days are going to call it. But thanks for attending. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation, and thank you all for contributing so much.